In 2018, deep within dark caves in Spain, a discovery shook the foundations of our understanding of human history. Trapezoidal symbols, dots, and hand stencils created 64,000 years ago, at least 20,000 years earlier than when modern humans, Homo sapiens, first set foot in Europe, were unearthed. That moment forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The authors of this ancient cave art were none other than the Neanderthals, a species that for centuries we have labeled as dull and brutish. For over a century, since the first remains were discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany in 1856, the image of the Neanderthal has been distorted. Early illustrations, particularly the anatomical reconstruction by paleontologist Marcelin Boule in the early 20th century, depicted them with an ape-like hunched gait, thrust forward heads, and vacant facial expressions. With their hands clutching crude wooden clubs, they created a toxic visual impression that sank deep into the human psyche, branding them as a flawed version, a lower rung on the grand evolutionary ladder leading to us. This prejudice did not stem merely from errors in reconstruction techniques, where scientists mistook bone lesions from severe arthritis in an elderly individual for the natural posture of the entire species. It also stemmed deeply from the biological arrogance of Homo sapiens. As the sole survivors, we have a tendency to rewrite human evolutionary history, turning the losers in the race for survival into symbols of cognitive inferiority. That narrative is simple and pleasing to our self-esteem. The Neanderthals went extinct because they were stupid, giving way to our intelligent and superior ancestors. Modern science has completely refuted this ideology. Analysis of Neanderthal DNA and sophisticated Mousterian tools proves that they were not our direct ancestors in a linear sense. They were a close sibling branch, a parallel human species that developed complex survival and cultural systems to reign over the Eurasian continent for hundreds of thousands of years amidst the harsh conditions of the Ice Age. Dismantling the image of the dull prehistoric man is a prerequisite. Only by casting aside the arrogance of the sole surviving species and acknowledging their remarkable intelligence can we approach the true, thorny question: why did such a successful human species vanish forever from the stage of Earth? To answer that question, we must completely strip away the aesthetic lens of modern humans, creatures born into a warm era, to re-examine the bodies of the Neanderthals themselves. Their short stature, bulging muscles, and massive skeletal frames are often viewed as signs of primitiveness or incomplete evolution. But from the perspective of evolutionary biology, this is a misconception. Neanderthal morphology was not a flaw, but a design masterpiece, a biological machine optimized to perfection to dominate the harshest environment any human species has ever faced, the Ice Age in Europe and Western Asia. In that world, where temperatures frequently plummeted to freezing levels and survival was measured in thermal calories, their bodies obeyed ironclad ecological laws. According to Bergman's and Allen's rules, organisms in cold regions tend to evolve larger bodies, broader barrel-shaped chests, and shorter limbs. The goal was clear: to minimize the skin's surface area exposed to cold air, thereby limiting heat loss. This is a survival strategy that nature has applied to polar bears, and Neanderthals applied it brilliantly throughout their evolution. The robustness of their skeleton and dense muscular system were not just for keeping warm. They were the foundation for immense physical endurance, a primal strength that allowed them to traverse deeply snow-covered terrain, cross rugged mountains, and engage in high-intensive hunts. In a world of scarcity filled with fierce predators, superior physicality was not a choice. It was a prerequisite for survival. But perhaps the most ironclad evidence shattering the stereotype of the brutish prehistoric human lies inside their skulls. The Smithsonian Institution and many leading research organizations confirmed that the cranial capacity of Neanderthals was actually on par with, and in many cases even larger than our own Homo sapiens average, ranging from 1,500 to 1,600 cubic centimeters. They possessed massive cognitive hardware. While the structure of their brain lobes may have differed, that size is undeniable proof of an extremely complex nervous system. And such a large brain requires a tremendous energy source, a nutrient-rich diet that a dull, incompetent species could never have sustained. And where did that abundant energy supply come from? The answer lies on the vast glacial grasslands of the Ice Age, where the diet and survival strategy of the Neanderthals depended almost entirely on hunting. But this was not a hunt for small game. We are talking about medium and large herbivores, reindeer, wild horses, bison, woolly rhinoceroses, and even the gargantuan mammoths. These were prey possessing terrifying strength and lethal defensive capabilities. Taking down these massive meat machines in open environments or treacherous valleys could not rely on mere muscle power or impulsive actions. It required a sharp intellect, the ability to plan detailed tactics, and a thorough understanding of the prey's migratory patterns and reflexes. Archaeological evidence, reinforced by analyses in the journal Nature Education, confirms that Neanderthals were master ambush hunters. They used spears tipped with sharp stones fashioned using the Mousterian tool technique, but designed specifically not for throwing from a distance, but for direct thrusting at close range. Imagine that! A hunting method that required extraordinary courage and perfect split-second group coordination, where each individual had to place absolute trust in their teammates. The price paid for this direct confrontation strategy is hauntingly visible on their very skeletons. The frequency of severe injuries found on Neanderthal bones, from broken ribs and spinal damage to skull fractures, bears a striking resemblance to the injuries of modern bull riders. This indicates that they frequently struggled at extremely close quarters with flailing giant beasts, a vivid testament to a high-risk lifestyle and an unparalleled warrior spirit. To maintain survival for hundreds of thousands of years through such an intensely dangerous method of hunting, a loose social organization or a cognitively weak group of individuals would have been wiped out within a few generations due to high casualty rates. Their resounding success in hunting large game proves the existence of a rich system for passing down experience, the ability to anticipate risky situations, clear division of labor within the group, and a powerful logical mind to turn the disadvantages of short-range tools into a lethal ambush advantage. They were not opportunistic scavengers. They were the apex predators of the prehistoric world. The formidable power of these apex predators did not stem solely from muscle or courage, but was forged through superior technical intelligence. Forget the image of them merely picking up random stones to smash things. The Neanderthal stone industry, known as Mousterian technology, was a cognitive leap forward compared to their hominid predecessors. They were masters of the complex levelage technique, a crafting method that required an astonishing capacity for abstract thought. The stone knapper had to precisely visualize the shape of the final tool hidden within the raw block of stone. They then executed a series of precise strikes with carefully calculated force and angles, only to release, with one final decisive blow, a perfect sharp flake ready to serve as a scraper, spearhead, or cutting tool. This was not instinctive behavior, but a deliberate mass production process, an assembly line of the Ice Age. Yet, the most brilliant evidence of Neanderthal technical intelligence, and one of the greatest shocks to the field of paleoanthropology, lies in their ability to produce and utilize birch pitch as an adhesive. This is considered one of the earliest applications of chemistry in human evolutionary history. Research by Nikas et al., published in PNAS regarding a 50,000-year-old stone tool in Northern Europe still coated in birch pitch, combined with practical experiments by Kozovic in the journal Nature, has proven an undeniable truth. The birch pitch distillation process was not an accident. It was a sequence of deliberate actions, requiring the heating of bark under anaerobic conditions at strictly controlled temperatures between 340 and 400 degrees Celsius. Even a small error could turn the entire batch of material into ash rather than the precious glue. Whether the process they used involved simple condensation methods or complex underground kilns, the manufacturing of an industrial adhesive to securely fasten stone points to wooden shafts demonstrates a remarkably high level of multi-step cognitive ability. It began with the conceptualization of combining two discrete materials, followed by sourcing the ingredients, executing a complex physical-chemical processing procedure, and finally applying the results to the reality of survival. A spear tipped with birch pitch was not merely a more effective weapon in the prehistoric world. It was the material embodiment of a mind capable of planning for the future, one that knew how to patiently delay immediate gratification to invest time and effort into a technological process that yielded long-term practical value. But the intelligence of Neanderthals did not stop at tool-making. Beyond the evidence of physical strength and survival intelligence, their fossil records offer deeply moving discoveries regarding their emotional depth and tight-knit social bonds. In particular, this includes their capacity to care for the weak, the sick, or the severely injured. A humanistic aspect we once mistakenly believed belonged only to Homo sapiens. Consider Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, where the story of compassion is etched into bone. The famous Shanidar I fossil is the skeleton of an elderly Neanderthal man. His life was a sequence of horrific injuries. A heavy blow to the left side of his skull likely blinded him in one eye. His right arm had withered and been amputated below the elbow, and a series of leg injuries made every step a painful ordeal. In the harsh wilderness of the Ice Age, an individual with such disabilities should have been a death sentence. Yet, astonishingly, bone analysis indicates that this individual survived for many years, perhaps even decades after suffering those critical injuries. This would have been entirely impossible without intervention, protection, food sharing, and dedicated care from other members of his community. Similarly, in France, the old man skeleton at La Chapelle-aux-Saints shows signs of severe arthritis, and he had lost almost all his teeth long before his death. This implies that his food had to be softened or chewed by others before being fed to him, a clear testament to altruism and profound internal solidarity. Archaeologist Penny Spiken's research argues that care for the sick and infirm among Neanderthals was not an occasional, rare occurrence. It was a core social mechanism, an evolutionary survival trait that strengthened group cohesion and, more importantly, preserved the treasure trove of experience held by the elderly. While science is cautious not to call this medicine in the modern sense, the biological traces left behind serve as compelling evidence that this prehistoric society did not operate according to a cold law of the jungle where the weak were abandoned. They had formed a society with deep humanity and compassion, a discovery that fundamentally alters how we perceive these extinct cousins on the human evolutionary tree. And can a compassionate society exist in silence? The question of whether Neanderthals possessed complex language or merely grunted nonsensical beastly sounds has plagued the field of paleontology for decades. The greatest barrier lies in the very nature of life and death. The core vocal organs, such as the larynx and vocal cords, composed of soft tissue, can never fossilize to leave behind direct physical evidence. They dissolve into dust, taking the secrets of a species' sounds with them. However, Modern science has found a way to listen to the echoes of the past through indirect evidence. One of the first landmark clues was discovered at Kibara Cave, Israel. There, archaeologists found a hyoid bone belonging to a Neanderthal. This small horseshoe-shaped bone, located in the neck and serving as an anchor for the tongue muscles, is virtually identical in shape and position to the hyoid bone of modern humans. This is the prerequisite anatomical condition, the mechanical foundation that allows for the creation of clear vowels and consonants, the first brick in the castle of language. But the greatest breakthrough, the game changer in the debate, came from research by Mercedes Conde Valverde, published in the journal Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. Her team used high-resolution 3D scanning technology to reconstruct the inner ear structures and the tiny ossicles of hearing from Neanderthal fossils. The results were astounding. Their auditory system was perfectly tuned to capture the frequency ranges identical to those used in the spoken language of Homo sapiens. Such an energy-expensive evolution would have been entirely meaningless if they had no need to hear and understand complex vocal messages. Not only did they have the capacity for speech, they also had the apparatus to listen. Genetically, the picture becomes even clearer as scientists discovered variants of the FOXP gene in Neanderthal DNA. This is a gene that plays a crucial role in the development of the brain regions controlling language and the motor movements associated with speech in modern humans. Although we must avoid the media's oversimplification of calling FOXP a divine language gene, the existence of this homologous gene structure dealt a heavy blow to the view that Neanderthals were mute or communicated only through instinctive gestures. Now, when combining this multidimensional body of evidence, from the coordination required for hunting large, complex animals, and the transmission of multi-step Mousterian tool-making technology, to their advanced auditory anatomy, the scientific community is forced to change its perspective. The focus of research is no longer on the debate over whether they could speak, but on a far deeper question: just how sophisticated had the grammar, syntax, and symbolism of their language evolved to be? And if language is the river of thought, then art is the fossil of that river. The capacity for symbolic thinking, the ability to assign abstract meaning to physical objects, has long been the final fortress of excellence belonging solely to Homo sapiens. It was the clear demarcation line between true humans and other primates until the artistic remnants of Neanderthals were brought to light, shaking to the core what we thought we knew about ourselves and the evolutionary history of mankind. The scientific earthquake erupted in 2018 when the prestigious journal Science published research by Dirk L. Hoffman. In 3 caves in Spain, La Pasiega, Maltraviezo, and Ardales, scientists found unmistakable traces of art. Geometric trapezoids painted with red pigment, hands pressed against rock walls and sprayed with paint, and mysterious clusters of dots. What was stunning was not just their existence, but their age. Using the uranium-thorium isotope dating method, an analytical technique measuring radioactive decay in the calcium carbonate layers covering the surface of the paintings, the research team determined their age to be at least 64,000 years. This figure was a cognitive shock. It predates the time when modern humans, Homo sapiens, were thought to have migrated to Western Europe by more than 20,000 years. The logic was undeniable. During that period, there was only one possible author who could have created them. That was the Neanderthal. The prehistoric humans we once mocked as clumsy and dim-witted. The evidence of their rich inner world does not stop there. Further back in the past, at the Cueva de los Aviones cave, also in Spain, archaeologists discovered shells that were carefully perforated and painted red with ochre minerals. These adornments date back as far as 115,000 years. Alongside these were traces of the use of manganese dioxide as a black pigment, suggesting a long-standing tradition of using personal ornaments and body painting, perhaps to express social identity or status within the group. These were not actions for survival. This was culture. Even in death, it seems, they found symbolic meaning. At the Shenadar site in Iraq, the classic debate over whether Neanderthals performed burial rituals for the dead, accompanied by wildflowers, continues. Although the initial hypothesis regarding the massive concentration of pollen around the Shenadar 4 skeleton has been challenged by the possibility that the pollen was introduced by burrowing rodents or bees, this does not diminish a more important fact. Many skeletons have been found in a flexed position, carefully placed in intentionally dug graves. This act itself demonstrates a profound awareness of death and respect for the departed, a cognitive leap. Although evidence of their art and rituals still faces many criticisms, the presence of these non-utilitarian behaviors is seriously eroding the view that Neanderthal cognition was limited to basic survival needs, gradually blurring the intellectual line that once absolutely separated them from our direct ancestors. Many counter-arguments notwithstanding, the presence of these non-utilitarian behaviors is severely eroding the view that Neanderthal cognition was limited to basic survival needs, gradually blurring the intellectual line that once absolutely separated them from our direct ancestors. This erasure does not stop at intellect. It goes deep into the very core of our biological nature. The extinction of the Neanderthals is often envisioned as a complete finality, a chapter closed with the death of the last anonymous individual in a cold cave in Gibraltar. But the truth revealed by DNA molecules tells a far more magical and romantic story, one not of an ending, but of a blending. Led by Nobel laureate geneticist Svante Pääbo, the Neanderthal Genome Sequencing Project published groundbreaking results in 2010. Irrefutable molecular evidence confirms that encounters between Homo sapiens migrating out of Africa and Neanderthals in the Middle East and Europe did indeed occur, and they were not merely fleeting meetings. They left deep genetic imprints, shattering the prejudice of absolute reproductive isolation between the two human species. Data from the U.S. National Institutes of Health indicates that the result of these prehistoric reunions is that 1 to 2% of the genome of nearly every modern human population living outside the African continent today originates directly from Neanderthals. These ancient DNA segments are not silent genetic junk. They have been and are actively interfering with modern human physiology. The Neanderthal DNA legacy shapes how our immune systems respond to new viruses, an invaluable adaptive gift they passed down to our ancestors as they entered unfamiliar lands. They influence skin texture, hair color, the ability to metabolize fat to withstand the cold of the Ice Age, and even the predisposition to certain diseases in the modern world. When aggregating all the Neanderthal gene fragments floating scattered throughout the genomes of billions of people living across the planet today, scientists estimate that about 20 to 30% of the entire original Neanderthal genome still exists, replicates, and functions vigorously in the bloodline of humanity. This realization completely changes the definition of extinction in human evolution. Neanderthals did not disappear as if they had never existed in this world. Instead, their biological machinery, honed over hundreds of thousands of years, melted and merged into the larger population of Homo sapiens. They left behind an eternal genetic legacy that each of us whose ancestors once left Africa carries in every one of our cells. Prehistoric people did not die, they live within us. The firm confirmation of the Neanderthals' robust physique, superior hunting tactics, sophisticated stone tool technology, rudimentary medical thinking, and profound symbolic awareness creates a colossal scientific paradox. If they were neither dim-witted nor weak, and had successfully weathered countless harsh Ice Age cycles over 300,000 years, why, at the very peak of human evolution, did they suddenly vanish entirely from the archaeological record around 40,000 years ago? Traditional hypotheses blaming their inherent weaknesses have collapsed. The scientific community is now forced to seek more complex models. Research by Chris Vasson suggests that even before Homo sapiens emerged, small population sizes, sparse dispersal into isolated groups, and prolonged inbreeding may already weaken their demographic foundation. Subsequently, Axel Timmermann's computer modeling highlights the immense pressure from sudden climate change, which decimated large game sources. This pressure resonated with fierce competition for resources as waves of Homo sapiens, with their larger social networks, flooded their territories. Simultaneously, The scenario of biological assimilation, where Neanderthal DNA was absorbed into a vast sea of modern humans, raises the possibility that they were defeated not by violence or cognition, but by the power of demographics. The picture of prehistoric humanity is now complete in its greatness and tragedy. They were an extraordinary branch of humanity that fought for survival to the very end. It is time to fully discard the image of the brutish caveman and acknowledge their astonishing complexity. The greatness of the Neanderthals lies not in the fact that they were identical to us, but that they succeeded in a completely different way, facing a brutal ecological and historical combination. And this leads to a greater paradox. If they were so excellent, what had the power to wipe them from the earth? Deciphering the exact, devastating combination of these causes will be the gateway that leads us into the heart of prehistoric darkness in the next episode.